Kia ora everyone. I'm sorry I couldn't be with you at this, and I'm hoping that Abdullah might fill any gaps that are still missing in this presentation. Meanwhile, I'm sitting here in my office the night before, and I'm taping a bit of voiceover so it can be played without me. This is a presentation that Ode and I planned to give in our symposium in Adiri, and then in that time it was she who was seriously sick and couldn't come. And so I gave a bit of a presentation without her, but we finally put the work together and we presented it at Cadiz at the European Educational Conference. And so it's that PowerPoint that I'm speaking to now. We are very aware that our own country's curricula and those of many other countries that we've looked at call for creativity as part of the general skills they want students to acquire, and also criticality and critical thinking. The curriculum documents, such as our New Zealand curriculum framework, stress the need for inquiry learning and for learning that is more personally meaningful and community and socially meaningful, with a goal to having students come out of our schooling system more socially aware and responsible. Nevertheless, the downturns in economies across the world, even ones like that of Norway where Ode is from, and the consequently reduced educational budgets, mean that policies are framed far more in reductionist terms, and therefore there is a stress on literacy, numeracy, computer technologies right across schooling, but particularly in primary schooling, and often this is measured in international testing that ranks countries' achievement in those areas against each other. And across the board in secondary schooling on examination results. In New Zealand, despite the movement, as it were, sideways with the NCA, increasing call by universities and other forms of control to provide exam success. Nevertheless, the need remains in all these countries at both the socio-political and the ecological level to engage citizens, to engage people, to engage our students and our population to be creative and critical members of society, creative and critical citizens. So the work we've been engaged in that we want to report here looks at the development of literacy, of meaningful and effective literacy, as a goal that is totally complementary and compatible with developing creativity and democratic competencies. And we're very interested in having a look at case studies of how this can take place, and we're going to report two of these, and also what the implications of this are for teacher education in its initial and ongoing stages, and what kind of teaching strategies we need to get our teachers to acquire in order to carry those out. So there are two research questions that have focused our research, which is an ongoing bigger project in this phase that we're reporting here. And they are, as they're written on the text. How can creative, interactive and aesthetic-based processes be strategically developed, and the key word here is strategically, and used to promote rich and critical literacy and democratic awareness? And then, what are the core skills teachers need to learn in order to effectively use such processes? Here I just want to briefly indicate the conceptual framework that we drew on, and as you can see we've bullet pointed 4 key areas. The first one is that literacy is not a single process but a very complex set of skills that are related to our understandings of society and related to the ways we interact in society in order to acquire those skills. Furthermore, as G points out, literacy and the way it is taught in our schools serves a wide range of socio-political and economic goals. We'll return to that in a later slide. Then there's a body of literature, a wide body of literature, that talks about how learning through the aesthetic engages body, emotion, mind, heart, and is a rich and holistic way of learning. And finally, we draw on the body of literature, again a very wide range, that looks at the interactive strategies of process drama as rehearsal grounds for life. This slide offers a working model of the way that literacy and citizenship can be related, and particularly looks at the question of what kind of literacies are and should be built by the state. What kind of societies and ideas of citizen participation do they create, and how are they used for tools of social construction? So in this model, I suppose the most obedient model, is the desire to create a citizenship that looks for obedience and compliance with both social and the economic expectations of the state. So what's needed here is that our citizens can decode, can encode, so they can go to work, so they can buy products, so they can buy insurance, they can vote, etc. At a higher level, or more complex level of citizenship, the state looks for creating capacity to develop tools for economic growth. And here there's an imperative to educate through schools people to be competent in computer and other technological literacies, and to be able to be leaders in the economic production, but still following within a norm. At the next level, there's the idea of a few people being able to shape and make brand new knowledge, stuff we'd never thought of before. And here, critical and creative literacies are needed, but so is social capital. You can't teach people to be critical and creative in a way that will make a change in society unless they have a rich experience of society to draw on and feel comfortable in. And so the statement that's being made here is that for the first forms, these ideas of citizenship are both elitist and passive, and that if we want to break and unpack these kinds of theoretical discourses, we need to find different strategies, and we need to find dialogic discourse. Our methodology in this larger case study was to use a series of case studies, and on the whole working with the participatory action research. Sometimes we were looking more at our own practice, leading the participation. Sometimes we were working very much off other people's initiatives and using them. And so as a result of that, we collected information that was both quantitative and qualitative, where we did look at results in normative testing in terms of ways that could be expressed through the national standards, but we also used observation, interview, participants' narratives. And in our analysis, we were particularly interested in aligning the literacy components of all our tasks against the values and competencies that are outlined in the country's documents, international tests, and also against the categorizations that were offered G that are reflected in the slide just before. And we also used the national curriculum statements to map democratic competencies and attitudes, and to build our analytic model from. As well as that, there was a theoretical aspect to this, where we looked for aligning the competencies and dispositions that we looked at between, and this is largely theoretical, this is not tested in the field, effective teaching and learning, interactive and creativity, and participatory democracy. Here we briefly report two of those case studies. The first one is from Old. He was working in a primary classroom, grade 4, in Norway, with a very simple story that was part of a teaching resource material that's given for the literacy curriculum. And it was a story about Anna, a young teenage girl being left to babysit. For some reason she's locked outside the door and the baby's in the bath. Together, the teacher in role and the students explored the meaning of the text. And use drawings, as you can see in the first one here, for modelling the families as photographer. The teacher in role playing Anna, looking for advice about what she should do, using freeze frames and then final improvisation of texts to elicit meaning and to develop a richer understanding of the story. As this slide suggests, the children found a range of solutions about how Anna should deal with her predicament. Here we want to emphasize that these solutions are not only addressing the literacy aspects of the curriculum, which are to find rich and detailed meaning from the text as well as decoding its print, but also to address how they see themselves standing in society, how they should behave in a time of crisis, how they should call on neighbours or on civil services. In other words, positioning themselves as active citizens within society. In terms of the dilemma of Anna calling for help and revealing the mess she'd made, the students offered a range of different responses, three of which are briefly summed up here. And in each case they explored the personal and social implications of each of these. The second case study is one where I worked with Nick Brown, who you all know, or many of you know, in his school, on a really interesting way that he and his offsider were playing with a Year 10 class in the study of the Pūtakawa tree. It's a private school, and so the students there are, if not from immediately rich families, within family contexts that are financially and socially privileged, and that are very largely monocultural. The strategy that Nick had evolved, and this was his project at this stage, I had looked at workshopping the text so that one class read the first half and then devised the second half, and the other half read only the second part of the play and devised the first part. And into this he brought me for a couple of days' work where I workshopped an exploration of values, of personal values and Māori values, and evolved dramatic symbols for them. In other publications we're going to report more extensively on our findings from this project, but what we did find was that Both the workshop that I led and the entire process that Nick had organised certainly created engagement and curiosity. I was able to witness how, during the work we did on values and on dramatic symbols for those values, we developed group understandings. And in terms of looking at how we look at engagement at a democratic citizenship level, those group understandings and the ability to contribute and critique and reshape group understandings is a very important component. It also allowed students to make an imaginative leap towards understanding the other, and, as I've suggested earlier, in this case Māori are the other for many of them. So to understanding and to empathising. And by this process we're suggesting that the students were vicariously acquiring cultural capital, in the same way that our students, the young children, were acquiring cultural capital about how to behave in a crisis. So now we come back to that model I held up before about how literacy can be used as a tool for social construction. And the suggestion here is that a strategic use of drama process is not just the pure play away and do what you like, but a carefully selected and strategic use offers analytic tools to identify and unpack given texts. And in doing so, it encourages the development of critical thinking, of critical literacies, and of creative literacies, the range of strategies whereby people can be creative and critical. And it also offers the opportunity for acquiring imaginatively and vicariously, but in a very powerful and agentic way, sociocultural capital. An argument here is that these are important contributions to developing engaged and collaborative citizenship. Here, we want to explore the range of teaching skills that we believe were involved here and that need to be carefully considered within our initial teacher education. We've selected only 3 drama strategies, and while we could extend them a little bit further, we think that even if these 3 were used, teachers could create some very effective and powerful collaborative and physically emotionally engaged situations. And the 3 we've highlighted are teacher and role, fictional framing, and the idea of hot seating a character. With this, however, is a sense of how do you develop these? And again, we've picked only 3 things we want to stress. The idea of scaffolding, of not jumping too fast to a strategy that's too difficult, but gradually building it. As we build belief in the drama, so we build competency in the skills we want students to use. That's the gentle part. At the kind of tension area, it's about developing critical counterpoints. So instead of just letting the drama roll through willy-nilly or safely, it's really important at some point to create something that challenges and creates a sense of otherness. If this were twisted, if this would change, what would happen now? And that was involved in both those slides we did. And one of the skills that teachers need to develop and acquire, but we should teach in our initial teacher education, is the idea of when do we have the teacher intervention, such a critical point. And of course, as well as these, there is a need for knowledge of the world, how to facilitate teamwork, knowing how students develop, and knowing how society in general operates and works. And if we can make the technology work, I plan to be online to answer any questions or comments.